Hello kids, how are you all? Hope you are doing well. We were studying the chapter Control and Coordination, and our today's topic is Spinal Cord and Reflex Action. So we are going to first study about the spinal cord. If we are talking about spinal cord is the extension of medulla oblongata of brain. We have studied about the brain, and in that medulla oblongata was there, and from there only the extension extent that is known as spinal cord. It is a long cord like structure. It lies in neural canal of vertebral column and extend from medulla to lumbar region. You can see in the diagram the vertebral column is given here. The vertebral column is divided into basically four parts: the cervical, thoracic, and lumbar. And after that, sacral region is there, and last hip bone, coccyx is there. So you can see it is in center hollow, and in center spinal cord is present, right? And this spinal cord extends up to the lumbar region. Okay. So here you can see the lumbar region. Okay. And conus medullaris is, you can say, distal bulbous part of spinal cord, and after that nerve roots are extended that are known as cauda equina. All right. Okay. So like brain, it is also protected by same three meninges and cerebrospinal fluid which protect its inside the bony cage of vertebral column. On each side of a spinal cord, gray matter forms two horns. One is dorsal, dorsal means to say backside, a posterior horn, and one is ventral, that is anterior horn. Okay, now dorsal horn is joined by a sensory nerve which picks up impulse from sense organ and brings them to spinal cord, whereas ventral horn arises motor nerve which takes the message from spinal cord to concerned effector organ. So if we talk about the basic function of a spinal cord, it is to conduct impulse to and from the brain. Next is acts as reflex center, mean to say controls the reflex action, and third is control the involuntary activities. Most of the involuntary activities are controlled by the spinal cord only. Okay, now if we study the transverse section of spinal cord, so it is a bit different from brain. Actually in brain the gray matter and white matter was there. Here it is opposite. The gray matter is present inside anterior side and white matter is at the periphery. Okay, and here in the diagram you can see there is a dorsal side which receives the sensory signals, and there is ventral side which carries the motor signal. Okay, so in the diagram you have seen the spinal cord and its transverse section also. Okay, now we are moving towards the next topic, that is reflex action. What are reflex action? There are certain body responses which are immediate, that do not require any thinking by the brain. So these actions are known as reflex action, and these actions are controlled by the spinal cord. Like we can take the example. For example, we withdraw our hand on touching any hot object. Like when we touch any hot object, we just spontaneously withdraw our hand. So that action is very quick and is not controlled by the brain, it is controlled by the spinal cord. Similarly, if we hit anything, any hammer on our knee moves automatically upwards. We do not control it, is not controlled by the brain, it is a reflex action which is controlled by the spinal cord. Now let's study these reflex action. What does they require? Actually, reflex actions require stimulus. Okay, let's take an example of a burning candle. When we touch a burning candle, right, we feel the stimulus, that is, you can say the temperature of our finger increases. That stimulus is carried forward by sensory neuron. Actually, the thermal receptor in the skin receives the heat, and the heat stimulus is perceived by thermal receptor in the skin of finger. Now, these are carried by sensory nerve fiber. Sensory nerve impulse is generated as flashed, and it carries the electric signals to the sensory neurons, and it goes to the spinal cord. And in a spinal cord, interneurons changes sensory impulse to motor impulse and passes them to motor neuron. These interneurons are also known as relay neuron. Now these motor neuron conduct the nerve impulse from spinal cord to the effector organs. These carries the signal, and effector organ response, producing the movement of the muscles. Like, it gives a signal and bicep muscles contract and withdraw the hand. So our hand is withdrawn, right? So this action was too quick, and here the signals do not wait for the brain to respond. They are quick and reflex, and this whole pathway is known as reflex arc. So what happens in reflex arc? Here, stimulus occur, sensory organ receives the stimulus. From there, sensory nerve carries the impulse to the spinal cord. The spinal cord, in a spinal cord, relay neuron or interneuron converts the electric signal to motor signal. Motor signals carries the signals from spinal cord to the effector organ, and effector organ responds by producing the movement or reflex action. So this whole process is known as reflex arc. So what does it involve? It involve, you can say, yeah, sensory organ, sensory neuron, then spinal cord, motor neuron, and effector organ, right? So if we talk about our arc or reflex action, so it basically requires three neurons. That is, one is sensory, second is relay or intermediate, and third is motor neuron. But in some cases, just like knee one, only two neurons, that is sensory and motor neurons, are involved. So minimum two neurons are involved, and in some action that are more complex, some more neurons might be involved. Okay, so in that, electric signals are carried by one neuron, but when they are transmitted to another neuron, that is synapse occur in between. In that, the electric signals are converted into chemical signals. It releases the chemicals, and those chemicals are received by the second neuron, and in this way the nerve impulse is carried. Okay, actually reflex action were evolved before the complex brain, as they are very essential for the survival. Automatic responses, so these are important for survival. And what happens in actually reflex action? What happens that when reflex action occur, so it is directly controlled by the spinal cord, but there the signals also goes to the brain, so that we could know that what happens. So that is consciousness, but it do not wait for the brain to respond. It respond spontaneously, because that was the important for during that time for the survival. Okay, so it reaches to the conscious area, that is brain. So after it happens, so that we could know. If we talk about kind of reflex action. So there are basically two kind of reflex action. One is unconditioned or simple, or you can say natural reflexes. These are inborn or inherited, right? Like you can say learning, judgment, previous experience, swelling, blushing, blinking of eyes, okay, and withdrawing of hand on touching any hot objects, knee jerk, okay. So these are unconditioned, right? Next is conditioned or acquired, or you can say cranial reflex. These are not inborn, these are learned by the experience and gradually responds to it subconsciously. So these are called acquired reflexes. Like playing any musical instrument, suppose you are playing guitar, you know very well to play the guitar, so whenever you touch it subconsciously you will play it melodiously, right? Like walking on keyboard of a computer, the one who works regularly can easily type without seeing also. That is, you can say, reflex, okay. Applying the brakes while any sudden action occur, ठीक है, like someone comes in the front of your car or bike, so the brake you apply suddenly is a reflex. So these are conditioned or acquired cranial reflex.